We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 42b. This Daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amar or Daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amar, there was a case of a person who deposited money by somebody, and that person gave the money to his mother, who put it in a chest, and then it got stolen. And Rava said, how are we going to judge this case? If we're going to say the shomer is chayev because it's like a shomer who gave it to another shomer, but that's not true. The person can say, Kol hamafkid al das ishto uvanav hu mafkid. Anyone who deposits is also depositing on the understanding that he might give it to his wife and his children. That's considered totally legitimate. Rashi explains, Kol hamafkid al das shelo yeh shomer nimna milamosran la'anshe beiso hagadolim. When a person deposits, it's on the understanding that the shomer doesn't have to refrain from giving it to the people in his household who are adults. V'ne'emonim lo hu demafkid, and so they're also considered to be trusted by the mafkid, and so therefore we can't really make the person responsible on account of shomer shemasr l'shomer. And then the Gemara says, so let's say to the mother, maybe she's the one that's responsible. She should have to pay, as Rashi says, she should pay because she didn't bury the money. And the Gemara says to that, Amra, she'll say, Lo Amar li de lavdi deininu. He never told me that it wasn't his. I didn't even realize that he was watching it for someone else. De akverinu, that I needed to bury it. So then we should say to him, Amai lo amrit lo. Why didn't you say to her that you were watching it for someone else? Why did you give her the impression that it was yours? So Amar, so he'll say to that, Kol shekain dechi amino lo dididi ninu. On the contrary, we can say a kal v'chomer that if I say that it's mine, tveim is dahar nabu. She's going to be even more careful, and so therefore that's not really considered to be irresponsible. So that's why Rava said, how do we judge this case? And so the Gemara says, Alama Rava, rather Rava says, Mishtaba ihu dahanu zuzei ashlaminu li'imei. He has to take a shvua that he gave the money over to his mother. Umishtaba imei dahanu zuzei osvinu bekarta lisa v'ignav. And then the mother has to take a shvua. She takes an oath that money was placed in a chest and it was stolen. Upatran, in this case, we're going to exempt everybody in this situation. And the Gemara continues, there was an apotropos, a caretaker of the property of orphans, and he bought an ox for the orphans, and he gave it over to the person who takes care of the oxen. But this particular ox, it didn't have teeth and molars, it wasn't able to eat, and then it died. Amar Rami Bar Chama said, how should the judges rule in this case? If we're going to tell the apotropos that he has to pay, Amar, he can just say, I gave it over to the bakar, I gave it over to the person who takes care of the cattle, and so therefore he's the one that's responsible. Now let's tell the bakar, let's tell the cowherd that he's the one that has to pay. But Amar, he's going to say, I put that ox together with the other oxen, and I threw food in front of it. I didn't know that it didn't eat. It's not my responsibility. And so the Gemara now says, Michli, let us see. Bakra shomer sachar diyasmihu. The Bakra, he really is a shomer sachar of the Yisomim. He's getting paid to take care of the cattle. So he should have checked and made sure that the animal was eating. And so the Gemara says to that, if the orphans actually had lost money in this case, that actually would be true. He's a shomer sachar on behalf of the orphans, and he would owe the orphans money because they lost money. However, in this case, and here what is the case? There actually was no loss to the orphans, because they found the original owner of the ox, and essentially this is a case of a mekachtos. He sold an ox without teeth, and therefore it's a bad sale. And so the Yisomim, the orphans, were able to get back the money from the seller. And so the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Elaman Kotoyin, so who's the one making any claim? Why do we have to rule in this case? It seems like the people who lost money ended up getting paid back. And so the Gemara says to that, Mari Detura Kotoyin, the owner of the ox, meaning the seller, he's the one that's making the claim, because he says, and you should have let us know. You should have let us know that the animal wasn't eating, that it was going to die. That way we at least would have been able to get the animal back. Now the animal died, there's nothing we can do with this animal, so it's a total loss. And so the Gemara says, My Modinon le. But the Gemara then says, well, what do you mean let us know? Meida Yada, the Mekachtos have it. Doesn't he realize that it was a Mekachtos? He knows that he sold an animal that didn't have teeth. So what did he need to know about? And so the Gemara says to that, we're talking about somebody who's like a middleman. He buys from here, he sells to over here. He doesn't really know what's going on. And so therefore he really is making a claim over here. Yes, it's a mekachtos. Yes, I would take the animal back. I'll give you the money back, but you should have let me know what was happening. And so the Gemara says, Hilkach, therefore, mishtaba iu delo havayada. He he takes an oath that he didn't know, meaning the seller takes an oath that he had no idea that this animal did not have teeth. And then the bakra, the person who was taking care of the cattle, he has to pay the value of the meat at the cheapest rate, because there was a loss over here. Again, if he would have let him know, he could have returned the ox, they could have slaughtered the ox and had the meat, and that's why he does in fact owe some money. And we will take a look at Rashi over here. Mishalim bakra demei basar bezul. The bakra, the cow herder, he pays the value of the meat at the cheaper rate. And Rashi asks, I have the following question. Minayin l'Rami Bar Chama din zeh. Where does Rami Bar Chama get this halacha? Malo l'safsira im horoa. What does the safsira, again, what does the seller have anything to do with the shepherd, or again, with the cow herder? Lo shomer shalohu. It's not his shomer, meaning to say that this shomer over here, the shomer sacher, is really a shomer of the yisomim. Why should he have to pay the safsira? And Rashi answers, V'nira li, it appears to me, the masnisin the hasocher hapara lechaveru v'yeshila la'acher. There's a Mishnah we had earlier, a person rents a cow to his friend, and then that renter goes ahead and lends it out to someone else, umesa kedarka, and then the animal dies naturally, so that's considered to be an onus that the shoel is responsible for, but the socher is not. To come Rabbi Yossi yachzer par lebailim. Rabbi Yossi over there says that the shoel pays, but he pays the para not to the socher, but he pays to the original owner. V'ukimna halacha Rabbi Yossi. We say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Alma afal pishein habaylim bale devorim shel shoel. We see that even though the original owner has nothing to do with the shoel, v'hasocher shehu lo bal devorim eino chaser klum, and the socher who really is the bal devorim of the shoel, he's the one that lent it out to the shoel, he hasn't lost anything. Sharei pater b'onsin, because he's pater from onus. Afilu hachi, nevertheless, hoel v'yesh lo din al hashoel ligvos, since there is a court case against the shoel from the socher to collect, yamdu habaylim harishonim b'mekomo. So instead of the socher collecting, the original owner is in the place of the socher, the Goven min hashoel, and the original owner is able to collect from the shoel. Hachanami, here also the same idea. Hoel v'yesh liyasamim ligvos min haroeh. Since the orphans do have a right to collect from the shepherd, shehu shomer sacher, he's a shomer sacher shalahem, he's their shomer sacher. Yamdu bailim b'makom hayisomim v'goven. So the original owner can be in place of the orphans, and they can collect. And Rashi continues, Umiu, nevertheless, if the case was that the orphans were losing out, let's say they had not been reimbursed by the seller, so lohaya osap shara b'maman yisomim, you couldn't make a compromise with the money of the orphans, l'shalem bezul, to say that the backer could pay the cheaper rate. The yasmi la b'nei mechilaninu, because the yisomim, the orphans, are not able to be mochel, we're only allowing the cheaper rate over here, where the yisomim haven't lost out, they've already been reimbursed, and now it is just the safsira, it's just the seller who is trying to get reimbursed, so then we say already the backer pays at the lower rate. Over here, where again the payment is to the seller, to the original owner, and it's not such a negligence on the part of the backer in this case. So hitil pshara b'neim, so you have this kind of compromise. You don't have to pay for the entire ox, what it was worth alive. Rather, you return the hide to the original owner. And when it comes to the meat, so you do an evaluation, you pay 2/3. Anytime we say that you pay according to that cheap rate, the way we evaluate that is that calculation is done in Babba Basra, so you pay according to that rate, again only in this situation where the payment is not to the Yisomim. And the Gemara continues, how gavra da'afkid kashusa gabe chavre, there was a person who deposited hops by his friend. Rashi says, kashusa humlin shematil nasoch hashecher, this is hops that you place in the beer when you're brewing beer. Havale ledidei nami karya de kashusa, and this shomer, the person watching over the hops, he also had his own pile of hops. Amar le lasarse, so he said to the brewer, the person making the beer, Mehai Rami, you should take from mine and you should brew the beer. Azal Rama meidach, instead he took from the other pile, he took from the pile that this shomer was supposed to be watching over. Amar Rav Amram said, how should the judges rule in this case? Now, if we're going to tell this person that he has to pay because he used the hops that he was supposed to be watching, Amar, so he'll say, I told the person brewing the beer to take from this pile, he took from the wrong pile. Now, if we're going to tell the person brewing the beer, Zil Shlem, that he has to pay, Amar, he's going to say, Lo Amar le my high Rami or my high low Sirmi. He didn't say take from this and not from that. It wasn't really clear. And the Gemara comments, now if it was the amount of time that really he would have been able to bring it from the appropriate pile, and he didn't bring it, meaning to say it was obvious he was bringing it from the wrong pile because it took a certain amount of time, so then already the owner shows that he's okay with the fact that it was being brought from the wrong pile, and so the Gemara says to that, that there was no real delay over here, it wasn't clear where it was coming from, so it's not as if the owner agreed to this, so to speak, but in any case, the Gemara still asks, asks, but what's the difference? What loss is there over here? But there's actually a profit in this situation, meaning to say, let's say the shomer actually used the hops that belonged to somebody else and he brewed the beer. So now he's made beer out of the hops. He should have to pay whatever the value of the hops was. He should pay that to the actual owner. What's the big deal over here? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Sama Brei de Rava, Rav Sama, the son of Rava, says, what happened over here was that the beer essentially soured, and therefore, since it was no good, so in such a situation, he can't really pay from the beer to the original owner. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ashi says, Bekise, we're talking about a situation of hops which have thorns that are mixed within them. And we'll take a look at Rashi, Karyas Kri, again, a pile, Amar Le Balabayas, the Balabayas said, Lesarse, that's the person brewing the beer, La Asher Al Beso, Ha'osa Sheikh or Shalo, the person in the household who brews the beer, Mehar Rami Hareu Hakri Shalo, he showed him his own pile and said, use that, V'yamar Le Mizet Tatel Sheikh, this is what you should use for the beer, Me'idach Shal Pikad, and instead the person took from the deposit. And the Gemara says, V'idach Shah Ashir, this is Gemara Parach, the Gemara is asking, Im Hayakri Shalo Karov, if his own pile was close, V'shal Pikad and Rachik, and the deposit was far away, V'shah Shliach Shir Mahalach Derech HaKarov V'lo Aisi, and then it's clear that the Shliach didn't come from the close one, so then Gali Daite the Balabais Denichale, then it's clear the Balabais is okay taking the deposit, Shahre Yadash Mishal Pikad and Havi, he knows that it's coming from the deposit, V'lo Micha B'yada, when he didn't protest. But then the Gemara asks, V'hakam Ishtar Shile, isn't there a profit over here? V'halohu Niskar HaKashush Shal Pikad, and he's essentially taken these hops that were deposited and turned them into beer. Sheitilu B'Shecher V'Shalo Omed V'Yashalim Mishalo, he turned that into beer, his is still around, he should pay from his own. And the Gemara says, Chala Hechmitz, the Gemara says that it went bad, and therefore there wasn't really a profit in this situation. He essentially used the hops of the deposit, that beer went bad, and so now if he's going to pay from his own, he's going to lose out. And the Gemara then had Rav Ashi's answer, Bekise Shahaisa Kishas Grua V'Kotzemu Rav and Ba. The situation over here was the hops were actually no good, there were thorns in it, V'lo Hishbiach HaShecher Kiritzono, and therefore the beer did not improve according to what he wanted, V'Kasha Be'enav Sheitilu B'Soch, and therefore he didn't like the fact that this is what was used for the beer. And we'll point out over here, the way Rashi understands Kamishtar Shile is that since he profited from using the hops and made beer, so he should just give his own hops back. Others interpret that the point is he should give the beer according to the value of the original hops. In any case, we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph.